pretty standard fare for reporters to find Canadians who've done something exceptional outside the country and are barely recognized at home. This next story might look like that, but in fact, when we started on it, we didn't even know that John Todd is a Canadian. It was his work that fascinated us, the new alchemy. And in the long run, turning sewage into water might matter more than transforming lead into gold.
It's not all yacht racing. Rhode Island is another tired industrial state, and Providence, the capital, another decaying city. Costume jewelry is the big industry here, and all the acids and solvents for putting gloss on the cheap earrings end up here. But what's this out by the dump and the stinking sewage plant? A greenhouse? Well, more than a greenhouse. They call it a living machine. Into it pours stinking sewage, and out of it, even flowers grow. The parts of the machine are plants, bacteria, fish, and snails, all of them hungry for the stuff we eliminate. It's an artificial swamp. Swamps have a way of devouring anything dumped into them.
Yeah, this is the real alchemy of nature.
John Todd, the alchemist. He makes clean water from filthy waste.
That's the raw sewage coming in, and then 5 days later, this is what's coming out right here.
The health department won't let you drink it, but now it's safe to dump into any stream.
I mean, this really is the garden. All you need to do is put some Christmas tree lights on and make it.
It's a long series of plastic vats, all connected by plastic tubing. The sewage bubbles and percolates from tank to tank over 5 days. It's putrid at the beginning. At the end, fish are thriving. Now, that's fine for human waste. It's already been processed in people's stomachs. But what about toxic industrial chemicals?
Amongst the plant kingdom, there are some really extraordinary capacities. For example, a hollow stem plant like this is able to take a compound like benzene or toluene and within its tissue actually break it down. And they render these things in these hollow tissues harmless.
But how much of this stuff is kind of eco-dreaming? I mean, it sounds good, but how practical?
I would say two things. One, I can treat it to drinking water quality standards. The other guy can't. I can also treat it for roughly a quarter the cost conventional technologies can do.
Here's the conventional technology. Providence stirs its sewage until the particles settle. But then that sludge has to be burned or buried, and the wastewater loaded with chemicals before it's put into the harbor. Then there's the smell. Good thing gulls don't have noses.
So every waste treatment plant that uses chemicals on the tail end is a carcinogen or cancer-producing factor.
So these things aren't as clean as we think they are, even when they're working properly.
No, the reason why it's been so silent is because there haven't been alternatives.
John Todd's alternative does work, but it's still experimental size, treating waste from about 125 households. All he needs to expand, though, is more space, because the real secret here is the ingredients for the broth.
We have friends who call up and say, I've got just the bacteria for you. In fact, some of the bacteria from here are made by a friend in North Hatley, Quebec.
So is this kind of like Coca-Cola? Nobody else is ever going to quite have the formula?
Yes, and part of the reason for that is that the formula is constantly changing because the organisms in here are self-designing. They're better at it than we are.
So will it make a buck? Over to Cape Cod and the town of Harwich, where cleanliness is next to godliness. 9,000 people here, a lot of septic tanks, and when they're pumped out, here's where the honey wagon stops. A private company is using the new alchemy to treat septic at half the normal cost. Dr. Susan Peterson is president of ecological engineering, and she sees big commercial possibilities.
We certainly see designing systems for neighborhoods where you could put it together in a very nice landscape site and provide the wastewater treatment for 200 or 300 houses And certainly then you could duplicate that from one neighborhood to the next.
Fine for neighborhoods, villages, resorts, but big cities?
I have designed for New York City that every third cross street would be ecologically engineered lake supported by a single row of these. It would heat and cool the area in the spring and fall. It would keep it cooler in the summer, freeze over in the winter, and you could skate.
A place to skate. There's the Hamilton, Ontario coming out. John Todd grew up, father an executive, mother an artist, and at the front door, Hamilton Harbor, a good reason to become an ecologist.
Between the ages of about 9 and 12, the lake that I knew, the body of water that I knew, was completely ravaged by industrial activity, so that I actually experienced massive fish kills and then the disappearance of many of the species of fishes that I knew.
It's the lore and legend John Todd shares with students and professors who come to Cape Cod to study at his new Alchemy Institute. Credentials? He went to McGill for agriculture of all things, and then Michigan for a PhD in fish. He tried to find out if fish talk. They do, though not about flashy hooks. Next it was teaching in San Diego with sojourns to the South Pacific. Todd was a pioneer in the emerging environmental movement. Among his close friends, Margaret Mead of anthropological fame, Buckminster Fuller of the geodesic dome, Jacques Cousteau of Oceans Everywhere. These folks in the classroom revere him, and he's won a top environmental award from the White House. But for some of the deep ecologists, John Todd is a traitor. He works on environmental solutions instead of just railing against all growth like some in the movement today.
There's a sanctimonious kind of purity that really hasn't any place in a complex society dealing with complex issues, all the way from health to jobs to the natural environment.
I mean, these are the environmentalists who say that we shouldn't be going to the bathroom, we shouldn't have as many people, and we shouldn't have factories.
Yeah, and they probably had problems when they were a child.
So, take that, and on to Venice, where solutions have eluded them for centuries.
Venice is a sewer, and we've just invented a new family of technologies which could clean up Venice. This technology that I'm talking about, you won't even see when you're in Venice. It's sitting down in the canal, and what it is a ecologically engineered, quote unquote, coral reef. Only it's made out of plastic. And inside it are all the organisms and the life support elements that take that crappy water and make it clean.
Well, say Venice, if you're going to do that on Saturday, what would you do Sunday?
Sunday, I'd like to complete the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. The idea is to complete it as a Gothic living machine. And each of the chapels are in fact an ecology serving a symbolic and real function for the city of New York.
Well, what do you mean? One chapel is the sewer and the other chapel is the garden?
That's right.
What are your dreams? What do you see at the end of the road?
Well, my fantasy is to be able to drive from Halifax to San Diego, and equivalent to a McDonald's stand, see these sort of beautiful greenhouses across the horizon, and pure water.